The cold metal walls of the diplomatic station hummed with alien energy as Captain Jake Morrison adjusted his uniform one final time. The meeting that would change everything was about to begin. 3 months of careful preparation had led to this moment on the neutral moon of Kepler 442c, where humanity would make first contact with the Zephyrian Empire. Jake looked at his small team with quiet confidence. Dr. Amy Rodriguez sat reviewing her translation protocols while Colonel Ben Clark checked his sidearm with practiced ease. The 3 humans represented Earth and all its colonies in this historic encounter with beings from 17 conquered star systems. The Zephyrians had sent their Supreme Commander General Vexstar to this meeting. Intelligence reports described him as a brilliant military mind who had never lost a single campaign. His reptilian species stood 8 feet tall with natural armor that gleamed like crystal. Their technology surpassed human capabilities in every measurable way. The massive doors slid open with a sound like grinding stone. General Vexstar entered the chamber followed by 6 heavily armed guards. His scaled hide bore scars from countless battles, and his yellow eyes held the cold calculation of a predator. The translator device on his throat crackled to life as he spoke. "So these are the primitive mammals from the 3rd spiral arm," he said with obvious disdain. "Your species amuses us with its presumption," Jake maintained diplomatic composure despite the insult. "General Vexstar, we come seeking peaceful relations between our peoples. Earth offers friendship and mutual cooperation." The alien general laughed, which sounded like rocks falling down a cliff. "Cooperation implies equality human. You possess nothing we require, and your military presents no threat to our expansion, Doctor." Rodriguez activated her translation matrix and spoke carefully. "General, perhaps we could discuss trade agreements or cultural exchange programs." Vexstar ignored her completely and focused his predatory gaze on Colonel Clark. The human soldier stood at attention, but his hand rested casually near his weapon. Something about the colonel's stance made the general pause for just a moment. "Your military advisor seems confident for such a weak species," Vexstar observed. "Our intelligence indicates your weapons are crude and your tactics predictable." Colonel Clark stepped forward slightly. "General, our species has survived and thrived through adaptation, not just superior firepower." The tension in the room increased as more Zephyrian soldiers entered through side passages. Jake realized with growing alarm that this was no longer a diplomatic meeting. The aliens had come to capture them as prizes or examples of human weakness. Vexstar raised one clawed hand and his guards leveled their energy weapons at the 3 humans. "You will come with us to experience Zephyrian hospitality in our detention facilities." Jake felt his heart racing but kept his voice steady. "General, this violation of diplomatic immunity will have consequences only if anyone survives." "To report it," Vexstar replied with cold amusement. That was when Colonel Clark moved. The human soldier dove sideways as energy bolts seared the air where he had been standing. His own weapon appeared in his hand with fluid motion, and he rolled behind a metal support beam. The first Zephyrian guard dropped with a smoking hole in his chest armor. Jake grabbed Dr. Rodriguez and pulled her toward the emergency exit as Clark continued his impossible fight. The colonel used the chamber's architecture against his enemies, moving constantly and never presenting a clear target. His shots were precise and deadly while the aliens struggled to track his unpredictable movements. Vexstar watched in growing amazement as this single human held off 6 trained warriors. Clark improvised weapons from debris and turned the aliens' own equipment against them. When one guard tried to flank him, the colonel somehow anticipated the move and struck from an unexpected angle. "How is this possible?" one of the Zephyrian soldiers gasped as Clark disabled another opponent with a move that defied their tactical training. The human soldier fought with a combination of skill and desperate creativity that the aliens had never encountered. He used psychology as much as firepower, making his enemies hesitate and second-guess their own instincts. Every assumption they made about human capabilities proved wrong. Jake and Dr. Rodriguez reached their escape pod as explosions echoed behind them. Clark appeared moments later, moving backwards while still engaging the enemy. Blood streaked his face, but his eyes remained calm and focused. "Colonel, we need to leave now," Jake shouted over the weapons fire. Clark nodded and triggered a small, explosive device that filled the corridor with smoke and debris. The three humans sealed themselves into the pod and launched into space as the station shook with secondary explosions. As they flew toward their ship, Jake looked back at his military advisor with new respect. "How did you know they were planning to capture us?" Clark wiped blood from a cut on his forehead. "Body language never lies, Captain. The general was studying us like specimens from the moment he walked in. Behind them on the station, General Vexstar stood among his wounded soldiers, trying to understand what had just happened. One human had fought 8 trained Zephyrian warriors and not only survived, but allowed his companions to escape. The efficiency and unpredictability of the attack disturbed him more than he cared to admit. For the first time in his long military career, Vexstar felt something he did not recognize. It was a small, cold feeling in the pit of his stomach as he realized that perhaps these humans were not as primitive as his intelligence reports had suggested. 3 months after the failed diplomatic meeting, the Zephyrian war fleets descended upon human space like a storm of metal and fire. General Vexstar commanded the invasion from his flagship Dominant Spear, expecting swift victory over the primitive mammals who had dared to embarrass him during first contact. The frontier colony of New Boston became the first target of the alien assault. Intelligence reports indicated minimal defenses and a population of mostly farmers and miners. It should have fallen within hours, but something went terribly wrong with Vexstar's carefully planned attack. Lieutenant Commander Alex Thompson stood on the observation deck of the colony's small defense station, watching the alien ships approach. He commanded only 12 Marines and whatever civilian volunteers could be armed and organized. Against 3 Zephyrian battle cruisers and 2,000 elite soldiers, the odds were hopeless by any reasonable calculation. Thompson had studied every available report about the failed diplomatic mission. Colonel Clark's improvised defense had given humanity its first glimpse of Zephyrian weaknesses. The aliens relied on overwhelming force and predictable tactics, while humans possessed something the invaders could not understand or counter. The first wave of Zephyrian dropships landed in the colony's main square, expecting terrified civilians to surrender immediately. Instead, they found empty buildings and streets that seemed abandoned. Thompson had evacuated non-combatants to the mining tunnels and turned New Boston into a maze of deadly surprises. Sergeant Lisa Morgan crouched in a concealed position, watching alien soldiers advance through what had once been the marketplace. The Zephyrians moved in perfect formation, scanning for threats with their advanced sensors. They could not detect the improvised explosives hidden in everyday objects or the humans, who had learned to mask their heat signatures. Thompson's voice whispered through the communication network he had established using the colony's maintenance systems. "Remember, they think like machines, so we think like humans. Adapt and survive." The explosion that destroyed the first Zephyrian squad came from a modified agricultural harvester that Morgan had converted into a remote-controlled bomb. The aliens scattered in confusion as more devices activated throughout the colony. Streetlights became weapons and water pipes became delivery systems for improvised chemical agents. Captain Roy Stevens led a team of miners through tunnels that connected every building in New Boston. They emerged behind Zephyrian positions using passages that did not appear on any official map. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that could appear anywhere and disappear just as quickly. Dr. Amy Rodriguez monitored Zephyrian communications from the human fleet and realized something remarkable was happening. The invaders were requesting reinforcements after losing nearly half their landing force to what should have been defenseless colonists. Their reports spoke of ghosts and impossible attacks that defied military logic. Thompson moved through the chaos of battle like a conductor directing a symphony of destruction. He had studied human history and learned from every guerrilla war and resistance movement. The Zephyrians possessed superior technology, but humans understood the psychology of fear and uncertainty. Corporal Mike Davis triggered a cascade failure in the colony's power grid that plunged sections of New Boston into darkness. The Zephyrians' night vision gave them an advantage, but Thompson had prepared for this. Mirrors and reflective surfaces had been positioned to create false images, while sound projectors made it impossible to locate the source of human voices. The battle continued for 18 hours as Thompson's forces inflicted casualties that mounted beyond anything the Zephyrians had experienced. Every tactic they employed was countered by human adaptability. When they tried to establish communication relays, the humans jammed them with music from Earth's cultural archives. When they attempted to corner individual defenders, those humans vanished into hidden passages or struck back with improvised weapons. General Vextar received reports that made no sense according to his understanding of warfare. His ground commander described facing an enemy that refused to follow established military doctrine. Human fighters used civilian infrastructure as weapons and turned the Zephyrians' own equipment against them through methods that seemed impossible. The most disturbing reports concerned their leader, who his soldiers had begun calling the Ghost Warrior. Thompson appeared wherever the fighting was heaviest, inspiring impossible acts of courage from untrained civilians. He seemed to anticipate Zephyrian movements and counter them before they were fully executed. Sergeant Lisa Morgan found herself defending a position alongside a farmer named Pete Collins, who had never held a weapon until 3 days ago. The Zephyrians advanced with their energy rifles raised, expecting easy targets. Instead, Collins used his knowledge of agricultural chemicals to create a cloud of corrosive vapor that forced the aliens to retreat with damaged equipment. Dr. Rodriguez began her own campaign of psychological warfare, broadcasting messages on Zephyrian frequencies. She told them stories of human determination and the impossible victory at New Boston. The tales spread through their communication networks like a virus, affecting morale across multiple battle groups. Thompson's most audacious move came when he captured a Zephyrian communication array and used it to coordinate false orders among their units. Alien squads found themselves attacking each other while human forces struck from unexpected directions. The confusion spread until the Zephyrian ground commander lost control of his own forces. After 36 hours of continuous fighting, the aliens began their withdrawal. They had lost over 60% of their landing force to an enemy that should not have been able to resist for 36 minutes. The survivors spoke in hushed tones about the unpredictable humans who fought like demons and vanished like smoke. Captain Roy Stevens emerged from the tunnels with his miners to find New Boston still standing. The colony bore scars from the battle, but it remained in human hands. Thompson stood among the ruins, coordinating rescue efforts for wounded civilians and captured aliens alike. General Vextar studied the battle reports from his flagship, trying to understand what had gone wrong. His tactical computers could not explain how inferior forces had achieved such results. The human named Thompson had somehow turned every Zephyrian advantage into a liability through methods that defied analysis. For the second time in his career, Vextar felt that strange, cold sensation in his stomach. The humans were not just more dangerous than his intelligence had suggested. They were something entirely outside his experience and understanding. Something that might be impossible to defeat through conventional means. The Ghost Warrior of New Boston had become more than just a military problem. He was a symbol of something in human nature that the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered in 17 previous conquests. Something that made Vextar's dreams troubled and his confidence shaken in ways he could not yet admit even to himself. The war spread across 12 star systems as General Vextar committed more resources to hunting the human who had become known throughout Zephyrian ranks as the Ghost Warrior. Lieutenant Commander Alex Thompson's unit had grown from 12 Marines to nearly 300 volunteers from every corner of human space. They moved like shadows between worlds, leaving chaos in their wake. Thompson stood in the cargo bay of the captured Zephyrian transport ship, studying holographic displays of their next target. The Zephyrian supply depot on Kepler 438b served 6 battle fleets and was considered impregnable. Its destruction would cripple alien operations for months, but Thompson had something more subtle in mind. Captain Jake Morrison's battlecruiser UES Defiance provided intelligence and support from the outer system. The human fleet had adopted Thompson's unconventional tactics on a larger scale, turning space battles into chaotic melees that favored adaptability over raw firepower. Zephyrian commanders found their perfect formations, useless against enemies who refused to fight by established rules. Sergeant Lisa Morgan checked her equipment one final time as the stolen transport approached the supply depot. The disguise was perfect down to the alien identification codes, but success depended on psychological factors that no computer could calculate. They were betting that Zephyrian guards would see what they expected to see rather than what was actually there. The depot's control tower granted them landing permission without question. Thousands of similar transports arrived daily carrying supplies for the invasion fleet. The guards who inspected their cargo bay saw standard military provisions and waved them through without noticing the subtle modifications Thompson's team had made to everything. Colonel Ben Clark emerged from his medical recovery to join Thompson's unit, bringing experience from the original diplomatic disaster. His presence added credibility to their military operations, while his knowledge of Zephyrian psychology helped refine their unconventional strategies. Together they had developed tactics that exploited alien weaknesses in ways that seemed almost supernatural. Dr. Amy Rodriguez continued her campaign of psychological warfare from intelligence headquarters. She ensured that stories of Thompson's impossible victories reached every Zephyrian communication network. The tales grew with each retelling until some alien soldiers spoke of the human who could walk through walls and read minds. Fear spread faster than plasma fire through their ranks. Thompson's infiltration of the supply depot took 6 hours of careful preparation. Instead of destroying the facility, they accessed its central computer system and began making subtle changes to logistics algorithms. Ships would receive wrong supplies while critical materials would be diverted to empty coordinates. The sabotage would look like random system failures rather than deliberate acts of war. The psychological impact was more important than the material damage. Zephyrian soldiers began to doubt their own equipment and question orders from their commanders. If the humans could penetrate their most secure facilities, then nowhere was truly safe. The Ghost Warrior had become a legend that undermined everything they believed about their own superiority. General Vexstar obsession with Thompson began affecting his military judgment in ways his subordinates could not ignore. He diverted 3 battle fleets from strategic objectives to hunt down 1 human unit. Resources that should have been conquering human worlds were instead chasing shadows through asteroid fields and dead systems. Commander Thekmore dared to question his general's priorities during a strategy meeting aboard the Dominant Spear. "Sir, our main offensive has stalled while we chase this single human. Perhaps we should focus on strategic targets instead of personal vendettas." Vexstar's response revealed the depth of his fixation. "You do not understand, Commander. This Thompson represents something that threatens everything we have built. He must be eliminated before his influence spreads further." The alien general could not explain why 1 human warrior frightened him more than entire fleets. Every report about Thompson's activities made the cold feeling in his stomach grow stronger. The Ghost Warriors seemed to anticipate Zephyrian moves and counter them before they were fully implemented. It was as if he could read their minds or see into their souls. Thompson's unit conducted increasingly bold operations that defied all tactical logic. They attacked heavily defended positions with minimal forces and achieved objectives that should have required entire armies. Their success rate was so impossible that some Zephyrian intelligence officers suspected the reports were fabricated. Propaganda. Corporal Mike Davis led a team that infiltrated a Zephyrian communications center and planted devices that would broadcast human music on all military frequencies during their next major operation. The psychological warfare was becoming as important as physical combat in breaking alien morale and cohesion. The climax of this phase came when Thompson's unit attempted their most audacious operation yet. They infiltrated Vexstar's flagship itself during a supply transfer when the Dominant Spear was docked at a repair station. Security was supposed to be absolute, but humans had already proven that Zephyrian assumptions about absolute anything were dangerously flawed. Thompson moved through the ship's corridors, like a ghost indeed, using maintenance shafts and service tunnels that his team had mapped from stolen technical manuals. The Zephyrians never considered that their enemies might study their own construction techniques and use that knowledge against them. The human commander reached Vexstar's private quarters and left behind a simple message written in perfect Zephyrian script: "You cannot defeat what you cannot understand." The words were carved into the general's personal weapons display, where he would see them every day. No alarms were triggered and no guards were harmed, but the psychological impact was devastating. When Vexstar discovered the message, he experienced something unprecedented in his long military career. Pure terror flooded his system as he realized that the Ghost Warrior had been within striking distance and chosen mercy over murder. The implications were more disturbing than any direct threat could have been. Captain Jake Morrison monitored Zephyrian communications and detected signs of discord within their command structure. The War Council was beginning to question Vexstar's leadership, while individual commanders showed reluctance to engage human forces. Fear was becoming humanity's most effective weapon against technologically superior enemies. Dr. Amy Rodriguez analyzed the psychological profiles emerging from intercepted alien communications. Zephyrian soldiers were developing something resembling post-traumatic stress from encounters with unpredictable human tactics. Some refused deployment to sectors where Thompson had been spotted, while others requested transfers to safer assignments far from the front lines. The Ghost Warrior had become more than a military problem for the Zephyrian Empire. He represented something in human nature that their entire worldview could not accommodate. The idea that inferior beings might possess capabilities that superior technology could not overcome challenged everything they believed about conquest and dominance. Thompson's legend continued to grow with each impossible victory, while Vexstar's obsession deepened into something approaching madness. The hunt for one human warrior was consuming resources and attention that should have been directed toward winning the war. But the alien general could no longer distinguish between defeating humanity and capturing the ghost who haunted his dreams with possibilities he dared not consider. General Vexstar stood alone in his command chamber, staring at the message carved into his weapons display. The words, "You cannot defeat what you cannot understand," seemed to glow in the dim light haunting him during every waking moment. Sleep brought no relief as his dreams filled with images of the Ghost Warrior, who had somehow penetrated the most secure ship in the Zephyrian fleet. The alien general's obsession with Lieutenant Commander Alex Thompson had reached levels that alarmed his own officers. 3 battle fleets now hunted 1 human unit, while strategic objectives went undefended. The Zephyrian War Council received reports of their supreme commander's erratic behavior with growing concern for the entire invasion. Admiral Kexelan dared to confront Vexstar during a secure communication from the outer fleet. "General, your fixation on this single human has compromised our military effectiveness. We should be conquering worlds, not chasing ghosts through empty space." Vexstar's response revealed the depth of his deteriorating mental state. "You have not faced him, Admiral. You have not seen what he can do. This Thompson is not just another enemy soldier. He represents something that could destroy everything we have built across 17 conquered systems." The Admiral's concern deepened as she realized her commander could no longer explain his fears in rational terms. The great General Vexstar, who had never lost a campaign, was becoming unhinged by encounters with a species he had initially dismissed as primitive mammals. Thompson's unit continued their campaign of psychological warfare with operations designed specifically to torment the alien general. They struck at targets that seemed random but always left traces that led back to their commander's presence. The Ghost Warrior was playing a game of psychological chess that Vexstar could not understand, let alone win. Dr. Amy Rodriguez analyzed intercepted Zephyrian communications and discovered that fear was spreading through their military hierarchy like a plague. Junior officers spoke in whispers about the unpredictable humans, while senior commanders questioned orders that seemed motivated by personal vendetta rather than military strategy. Captain Jake Morrison exploited this division by feeding intelligence to Zephyrian dissidents who had begun to see their leadership as fallible. The Empire's unity started to crack under pressure from fighting an enemy that refused to be conquered through conventional means. Some worlds had already begun secret negotiations with human diplomats. Sergeant Lisa Morgan led a team that infiltrated a Zephyrian research facility studying human psychology and tactics. Instead of destroying the data, they modified it to emphasize the most frightening aspects of human unpredictability. The altered reports made their way to Vexstar's personal files, where they fed his growing paranoia about Thompson's capabilities. Colonel Ben Clark coordinated with Thompson to develop new tactics that specifically targeted Zephyrian's psychological weaknesses. They had identified the aliens' rigid command structure and inability to adapt quickly as fundamental flaws that could be exploited through carefully planned chaos and misdirection. The most devastating operation came when Thompson's unit attacked a Zephyrian communications relay and used it to broadcast fake orders throughout their fleet. Ships received contradictory instructions while ground forces were told to advance and retreat simultaneously. The confusion lasted for hours as commanders tried to determine which orders were legitimate. General Vexstar watched his carefully organized invasion dissolve into chaos as Thompson's psychological warfare reached new levels of sophistication. The Ghost Warrior seemed to understand Zephyrian military doctrine better than some of their own officers. He used their strengths against them and turned their advantages into liabilities through methods that defied analysis. The breaking point came when Thompson orchestrated a series of simultaneous attacks across 6 star systems. Each operation bore his distinctive signature but occurred at the same time, making it impossible for one human to be responsible for all of them. The implications terrified Vexstar more than any direct confrontation could have accomplished. Commander Vekmar finally confronted his general about the deteriorating military situation. Sir, our forces are demoralized and our strategy has become reactive rather than aggressive. This human has somehow gained control of our decision-making process. Vexstar's response was barely coherent. He is inside our minds, Vekmar. The Ghost Warrior knows what we will do before we do it. He has weaponized our own thoughts against U.S. Dr. Amy Rodriguez intercepted communications revealing that some Zephyrian units were refusing to engage human forces entirely. Reports of Thompson's presence in any sector caused requests for reassignment or claims of equipment malfunction. The legend of the Ghost Warrior had become more effective than actual military action. Thompson himself remained focused on the psychological aspects of warfare, understanding that victory would come through breaking alien morale rather than destroying their ships. He studied every intercepted communication about Vexstar's mental state and planned operations designed to increase the general's paranoia and isolation from his own command structure, the human commander's most subtle. Victory came when he arranged for Zephyrian intelligence to intercept false communications suggesting that Thompson had supernatural abilities or access to alien technology. The reports were carefully crafted to seem credible while being just impossible enough to disturb anyone who believed them. Captain Jake Morrison coordinated fleet operations that supported Thompson's psychological campaign by making Zephyrian tactical doctrine seem inadequate against human adaptability. Every space battle became a demonstration of how rigid thinking could be defeated by creative problem-solving and willingness to break established rules. Corporal Mike Davis led a team that infiltrated Zephyrian medical facilities and planted evidence suggesting that humans possessed genetic modifications that made them immune to certain alien weapons. The false information spread through their research networks, creating doubt about their technological superiority. General Vexstar found himself trapped in a mental prison of his own making as Thompson's psychological warfare reached its intended target. The alien commander who had conquered 17 star systems was being systematically destroyed by an enemy who fought with weapons he could not see or understand. The Zephyrian Empire's military effectiveness continued to decline as their supreme commander's obsession consumed resources and attention that should have been directed towards strategic objectives. Fear had become humanity's most powerful ally in a war that was being won through psychological means rather than superior firepower. Admiral Kexelen began making plans for a change in leadership as reports reached her about Vexstar's increasingly erratic behavior. The general who had been their greatest military asset was becoming a liability that threatened the entire invasion. But removing him would require careful political maneuvering within the Empire's rigid hierarchy. Thompson's campaign had achieved something unprecedented in galactic warfare. He had turned the technologically superior enemy's greatest strength into their most devastating weakness by making them afraid of their own shadows. The Ghost Warrior had become real in the minds of his enemies, making victory possible through methods that no military academy had ever taught. General Vexstar made his final desperate gambit, knowing that his career and sanity depended on capturing or killing the Ghost Warrior who had haunted his dreams for months. The trap he set was elaborate beyond anything attempted in galactic warfare, involving 3 star systems and the bulk of the remaining Zephyrian fleet. At its center were 5,000 human civilians captured from frontier colonies. The alien general knew Thompson's psychological profile suggested he could not abandon innocent people to alien custody. Intelligence reports indicated the human commander had risked everything multiple times to protect non-combatants. This weakness would finally allow Vexstar to corner his tormentor in a battle of his own choosing, Lieutenant Commander Alex. Thompson received the transmission showing terrified human families held in detention centers across the Zarian system. The message was simple and direct: come alone or watch them die one by one until he surrendered. Every tactical computer analysis indicated it was an obvious trap, but Thompson's response was equally predictable. Captain Jake Morrison tried to argue against the suicidal mission from the bridge of the UES Defiance. Alex, this is exactly what Vexstar wants. He knows you cannot ignore those civilians, but walking into his trap will not save them. Thompson studied the tactical displays showing massive Zephyrian formations positioned throughout the system. Jake, I have been fighting this psychological war for months. Now it is time to finish it face to face with the alien who fears what he cannot understand. Dr. Amy Rodriguez coordinated intelligence operations that revealed the true scale of Vexstar's obsession. The general had committed nearly 70% of his remaining forces to this one operation, abandoning strategic positions throughout human space. His own officers were questioning orders that seemed motivated by personal madness rather than military necessity. Colonel Ben Clark assembled ground forces and prepared to coordinate with Thompson's assault, despite knowing the odds were impossible. The human military had learned to embrace impossible odds as merely another tactical challenge. If their Ghost Warrior was walking into hell, they would make sure he had company for the journey. Sergeant Lisa Morgan led advanced reconnaissance teams that infiltrated the outer edges of the Zarian system, gathering intelligence about Zephyrian defensive positions. What they found confirmed everyone's worst fears. Vexstar had created a 3-dimensional maze of overlapping fire zones designed to trap and destroy anything that entered. The battle began when Thompson's small fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly into the teeth of Zephyrian defenses. Energy weapons lit up space like an angry constellation as alien ships moved to surround the human forces. But Thompson had studied this moment for months and prepared surprises that even Vexstar could not anticipate. Captain Morrison's battle cruiser launched a coordinated attack that drew Zephyrian attention, while Thompson's unit used captured alien ships to penetrate their formations. The humans fought with desperate creativity, turning every Zephyrian advantage against them through tactics that bordered on miraculous improvisation. Dr. Rodriguez began broadcasting on all Zephyrian frequencies, telling their soldiers that their invincible general had become so obsessed with one human that he was sacrificing the entire invasion fleet. The psychological warfare reached its peak as alien forces began to question orders that seemed designed to satisfy personal vendetta rather than achieve military victory. Thompson's assault teams penetrated the detention centers where human civilians were held using stealth technology combined with intimate knowledge of Zephyrian security procedures. Each rescue operation was timed to create maximum confusion while demonstrating that their supposedly impregnable facilities could be breached by determined humans. General Vexstar watched his perfect trap falling apart as Thompson's forces achieved impossible objectives through methods that defied every assumption about human capabilities. The Ghost Warrior was not just surviving the elaborate ambush, but turning it into another demonstration of Zephyrian inadequacy against unpredictable enemies. Corporal Mike Davis led civilian evacuation operations while simultaneously coordinating attacks on Zephyrian command centers. The humans moved with precision that seemed supernatural to alien observers who could not comprehend how inferior forces continued to outfight superior technology through sheer adaptability and willpower. The climactic moment came when Thompson fought his way aboard the dominant spear to face Vexstar in personal combat. The alien general waited in his command chamber surrounded by the bodies of guards, who had tried to stop the Ghost Warrior's impossible assault through heavily defended corridors. Vexstar raised his ceremonial blade as Thompson entered the chamber, carrying only standard human weapons. Finally, we meet face-to-face Ghost Warrior. Now you will learn why the Zephyrian Empire has conquered 17 star systems. Thompson's response was calm and measured, despite the desperate battle raging around them. General, I am not here to prove human superiority. I am here to show you that some things cannot be conquered, only understood. The fight that followed was both physical and psychological, as two completely different approaches to warfare clashed in deadly harmony. Vexstar fought with centuries of military training and natural advantages, while Thompson relied on adaptability and refusal to accept defeat even when logic demanded surrender. The alien general's superior strength and speed should have ended the combat quickly, but Thompson's unpredictable movements and improvised tactics neutralized every advantage. When Vexstar attacked with overwhelming force, the human was not where he expected. When the alien tried to anticipate human strategy, Thompson changed tactics in ways that seemed impossible. Colonel Clark's forces finally breached the ship's outer defenses and began fighting their way toward the command center. The sounds of human voices speaking in their incomprehensible language filled the corridors, making Zephyrian defenders question whether they were facing soldiers or something beyond their understanding. The decisive moment came when an explosion damaged the dominant spear's power systems and sections of the command chamber began collapsing. Vexstar found himself trapped under debris with energy conduits sparking dangerously around his position. Death seemed certain until Thompson made a choice that shattered the alien's entire worldview. Instead of claiming victory over his fallen enemy, Thompson risked his own life to help the wounded general reach safety. The human warrior, who had been painted as humanity's greatest weapon, demonstrated mercy toward someone who had tried to destroy his entire species. Vexstar stared at Thompson in complete bewilderment as they reached the evacuation pods. "Why did you save me, Ghost Warrior?" "I am your enemy." Thompson's answer revealed the true nature of humanity's strength in the face of galactic warfare. "General, you were never my enemy. You were just someone who did not understand that some battles cannot be won through conquest." As they escaped the dying ship, Vexstar experienced something that no amount of military training had prepared him for. The realization that everything he believed about strength and superiority might be fundamentally wrong. The Ghost Warrior had shown him mercy when victory was within reach, demonstrating a form of power that transcended anything in Zephyrian philosophy. The aftermath of the battle at Zarian changed everything about the war between humans and the Zephyrian Empire. General Vexstar's forces retreated in complete disorder as news of their commander's defeat spread through alien communication networks. But more importantly, word spread about the human warrior, who had shown mercy to his greatest enemy when victory was assured. Vexstar himself was a changed being as he stood in the medical bay of a human ship receiving treatment for injuries sustained during their final confrontation. The alien general, who had conquered 17 star systems, found himself questioning everything he had believed about warfare and the nature of strength itself. Lieutenant Commander Alex Thompson visited his former enemy as recovery progressed, noting the profound changes in the alien's demeanor. The predatory confidence was gone, replaced by something resembling confusion mixed with unwilling respect for concepts that challenged his entire worldview. "I do not understand your actions, Ghost Warrior," Vexstar said, using the title that had once been meant as an insult. "Military doctrine demands that victorious commanders eliminate their enemies to prevent future threats." Thompson sat down beside the medical bed, considering his words carefully. General, true victory is not about destroying your enemies. It is about showing them that they do not need to be enemies at all. Captain Jake Morrison coordinated diplomatic negotiations with the fractured Zephyrian Empire as different factions struggled to understand what had happened to their invincible military. Some worlds chose to continue fighting, while others began secret talks about ending a war they could no longer hope to win. Dr. Amy Rodriguez published her studies on interspecies psychology, showing how fear and respect could transform understanding between different civilizations. Her work became the foundation for a new field of xenopsychology that would guide future contact with alien species throughout the galaxy. The HFY War Council met in emergency session to address the crisis of leadership created by Vexstar's psychological breakdown and military defeat. Admiral Kexelen argued for continued resistance, while Commander Vekmer suggested that perhaps the humans had demonstrated something worth learning rather than destroying. Colonel Ben Clark established a new military doctrine based on adaptive tactics and psychological warfare, ensuring that humanity would never again be underestimated by potential aggressors. The doctrine became required study in military academies across human space as officers learned to think beyond conventional strategies. Thompson's legend continued to grow, but now it carried different meaning for both species. Among humans, he represented the power of determination and creativity against impossible odds. Among Zephyrians, he had become something more complex, a symbol of strength that did not require conquest to prove itself. Sergeant Lisa Morgan led teams that helped evacuate Zephyrian wounded from battle zones, demonstrating the same mercy their commander had shown to General Vexstar. These acts of unexpected compassion created ripple effects throughout alien military units as soldiers began to question why they were fighting beings who saved their lives. Vexstar's recovery was physical, but also philosophical, as he struggled to understand concepts that had no equivalent in Zephyrian culture. The idea that showing mercy could be a form of strength rather than weakness challenged every assumption about military effectiveness and species dominance. During one of their conversations, Thompson explained human history to his former enemy, describing how their species had learned to survive through cooperation as much as competition. "We fought each other for thousands of years, General, but we also learned that some victories are not worth the cost of achieving them." The alien general listened with growing amazement as Thompson described wars where enemies became allies and conflicts that ended with mutual understanding rather than total destruction. These concepts were so foreign to Zephyrian thinking that they seemed like fantasy rather than historical fact. Dr. Rodriguez coordinated cultural exchange programs that allowed members of both species to learn from each other in controlled environments. The results were remarkable as Zephyrians discovered that humans possessed wisdom that complemented their own technological achievements, while humans gained access to knowledge from 17 different conquered civilizations. Captain Morrison's diplomatic efforts gradually bore fruit as more Zephyrian worlds chose to end hostilities rather than continue a war they no longer understood. The Empire's unity fractured along philosophical lines, as some aliens embraced new concepts while others clung to traditional beliefs about conquest and dominance. Corporal Mike Davis established communication networks that allowed Zephyrian and human civilians to interact directly for the first time. These grassroots connections proved more effective than formal diplomacy in building understanding between species that had been programmed to see each other as enemies. General Vexstar made the most difficult decision of his long military career when he chose to retire from active service and dedicate his remaining years to studying human philosophy. The alien who had once dismissed humans as primitive mammals now sought to understand the source of their impossible strength. In a private communication to Thompson, the former general admitted something that would have been unthinkable months earlier. "I have learned that true strength comes not from the ability to conquer, but from the wisdom to know when conquest is neither possible nor necessary." Thompson's response reflected the deep respect that had developed between former enemies. "General, you have shown more courage in questioning your beliefs than most beings show in battle. That willingness to change is what makes victory possible for everyone. The war officially ended not with surrender or decisive battle, but with gradual recognition that continued fighting served no purpose for either species. Some Zephyrian worlds chose to maintain independence while others requested membership in an expanded human confederation based on equality rather than conquest. Thompson retired from active military service but continued working as an advisor, helping establish protocols for contact with other alien species. His experiences with the Zephyrians had proven that even the most hostile first contact could evolve into mutual understanding given patience and willingness to see beyond surface differences. Colonel Clark's new military doctrine spread throughout human space but also found unexpected acceptance among reformed Zephyrian units. The aliens discovered that adaptive tactics and psychological awareness made them more effective soldiers, while reducing casualties on all sides of future conflicts. Dr. Rodriguez's xenopsychology research attracted students from dozens of species as the galaxy began to understand that psychological factors were often more important than technological advantages in determining the outcome of interspecies conflicts. The final scene of this transformation showed children on both human and Zephyrian worlds, learning about the war not as a tale of conquest but as a story about the power of understanding and the courage to change deeply held beliefs when confronted with something unprecedented. General Vextar spent his final years teaching at a multi-species academy, where he shared hard-won wisdom about the limitations of military solutions to complex problems. His greatest lesson was simple. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy becomes your most valuable teacher if you have the wisdom to listen rather than the pride to destroy. The Ghost Warrior's legacy lived on as a reminder that true victory comes not from defeating your enemies, but from showing them that they never needed to be your enemies in the first place. In a galaxy full of species that had learned to conquer, Thompson had demonstrated the far more difficult art of teaching others to understand.